Greetings, friends. I'm coming to share a story with you that I hope will build your faith and give you encouragement. And I want to start with you thinking about John chapter 9. Jesus is walking along and sees a man that's blind from birth. I think it's been blind for like 38 years or so. And the disciples asked that proverbial question, why is this guy blind? Something he did or something his parents did? And that's the way people think. They see people in hard times or struggling or with a physical ailment, and immediately they begin to think, well, God's wrath and judgment is on that person. Otherwise, he wouldn't be blind or he wouldn't be sick or whatever. And I know people now that feel that way, that feel like, something's going wrong, and maybe it's because God doesn't love them or that they've blown it in some way or they're a sinner. But Jesus makes a response to the disciples that's critically important to hear. He said he's neither blind for anything he or his parents did. He's blind because the Son of Man has need of him right now. Now, what does that mean? That means that this man has been blind all this time, but in a moment, God is going to glorify himself through Jesus Christ by healing the blind guy. And so I was talking about this one time at a dinner table, actually, and a young girl at the table said, does God still heal blindness today? And it was almost ironic because the girl's father was sitting there at the table and immediately remembered a narrative that he and I had been engaged in Dallas, Texas, a few years ago. There was a man that had a friend who was blind with macular degeneration, couldn't see at all. And so his friend asked my friend to go with me to pray for this guy at his home. So my friend and I went over to the guy's home. And as we drove up, you could just tell that the yard was, ill repaired and the weeds were growing over and that he just hadn't taken care of it. And so we knock on the door and he lets us in the house and he's blind. He's blind with this macular degeneration. And so we go in the house and there, again, inside the house too, you could just tell the guy didn't have very good vision because there was obstacles in the ways and almost a little pathway. I'll never forget that. But anyway, we prayed for him and then we left. All right. And that was that. Never heard any more from him. And about 2 years later, say 2 years later, my friend who went with me, took me over there actually to pray for this guy, saw this guy in Home Depot. And he said, do I know you? He said, aren't you the guy that was blind with macular degeneration? And the man said, yeah, that's me. I was completely healed. And my friend said, well, why didn't you let us know? And he said, he just went on about his life. And I think too often that happens. God does what God's going to do, and whether we know about it or not is really not what is important. It's what's important in the moment when God is moving in a person's life. And I want you to go back and read that narrative in John chapter 9 about the blind man. His parents don't know what to do with it, or they want to kick him out of the synagogue. The church leaders don't know what to do with it. He doesn't even know who healed his eyes. He doesn't know till later in the narrative in John that it was Jesus that healed him. But I want you to read that because I want you to be encouraged. Say, look, sometimes God always moves in his timing. And sometimes not when we think he should or when we want him to, but just wait on the Lord. And it reminds me of that great passage in Luke chapter 18, verse 1. Jesus tells a parable to the disciples so they will pray and not lose heart. Pray and not give up. And that's the God we serve. He doesn't want us to lose heart. He wants us to keep pressing into him, knowing that our God is capable of all things, including healing blindness, not only in the day of Jesus, but in our time as well. And there's been a couple other times that I've seen blind people healed. That's the God we serve. So my job is simply to pray, lay hands on the sick and anoint them with oil. God's got the hard part. And once in a while, God gives us a report, as in the case of this guy 2 years later, who testified to the fact that God healed him of macular degeneration, which is incurable. And it's an incurable disease when your eyes digress to that point, all right? So look, I want you to know two things. I'm telling you the truth, and I hope you know that. I'm not making this story up, but I want you to know that's the God we serve. And secondly, I wanted to encourage you. Don't lose heart. Keep pressing in. and continue to let the Lord know your heart and your desire, not just maybe for yourself, but for others as well, okay? So look, I hope this has been helpful. I want to encourage you to reach out to me right now. I'd love to hear your comments if you're on Facebook, or share your prayer requests. I get those in every day from all over the world. Also, that YouTube page, Paul Tetsky Ministries, YouTube, which is 500 teachings and testimonies for people from all over, all right, for you. And again, I'm doing this because I want to encourage you. And if you want to go to my website and hit the subscribe button and follow Rivers and me on our weekly e-blast that we send out, subscribe and we'll add you on that list, all right? So again, I'm doing this for you to encourage you. Look, wait on the Lord. Wait on the Lord, And I want you to read John chapter 9. Just go back and read that chapter and see how the God of all gods, Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, worked in his life and continues to work in our lives today, all right? So go in peace and serve the Lord. And all God's people said, amen.